Welcome back to One Winning Pod. We're going to preview the second matchup, the Ravens versus the Browns, this time at First Energy Stadium over in Cleveland. We will be seeing Deshaun Watson for the first time in a Browns uniform. Guys, right now, I think we should just go and say our off-the-cup opinions of how we think this game is going to go. I'll say it first. I think it'll be closer than we want, but I think this will be a matchup I think the Ravens are really looking forward to.
Yes, 100% agree. This game will be closer than we want it to be, particularly if Lamar is unable to play. It sounds like Huntley should be able to play. There's no rule against Saturday games and concussion protocol. If he clears, he's good. And Anthony Brown, otherwise, I think the Ravens will win. I don't know what the spread is yet. I'll look it up, but I feel like if I had to guess, I'm going to say Ravens are favored by 3.5 points, and that feels about right. And I could see it being that 0.5 that really screws you. So, yeah, it'll be probably closer than we want it to be, but I think it's mostly going to be because the offense doesn't put up points. I don't expect their offense to do much.
Yeah, this Cleveland Browns team has been an interesting one all year. Their defense has been a disappointment, yet not awful. And their offense has been at times explosive and at other times just non-existent. One thing I will say that should play into the Ravens' favor, we're getting the Browns. They have Watson back. He's obviously not back to where he was before he had his time off, for lack of a better term. But they're really beat up on offensive line. They've had several injuries, particularly at the center position. They're down to emergency center, a guy who they were not hoping to put down at center at all this year. And already were going into the year kind of questioning how they were going to replace their longtime vet center who was there. But that should definitely help and play into the Ravens' favor with this front seven. We've just seen these past few weeks. It's just incredible because that's been the strength of this team for so many years. Has been their offensive line, their ability to rush the ball effectively and use that as a way to really try and control clock and the game. Nick Chubb, the past 4 weeks has really not been himself, and it's just been because of offensive line injuries. They just have not been able to run the offense the way they would want to through the running game. And when we're looking at this matchup from the Ravens defense versus the Browns offense, I think that's the first thing you got to look at as something that the Ravens can use to their advantage.
All right, guys, I got to jump in here. I don't even think it's homerism, but I'm stunned. Browns -3. That's the spread. Browns -3. Okay. I don't know what they saw that I didn't see.
Well, I think probably the question of quarterback for the Ravens is probably playing into that.
Yeah. Maybe it's worth betting now. I might actually literally do that. The over-under is 37.5, and that feels about right. I think it's going to be lower scoring, and yeah. I'm very surprised because, Watson, saying his name, this is going to suck for a while. Watson, he definitely looked better in the second half from an efficiency perspective. He's only been completing about half his passes in the first 2 games back, but he got a lot of completions in the second half of the game, and I don't know what the split is there, but it was substantially better. And they were actually leaning on it because, like you said, Peter, the run game has not been the same ever since these injuries. The only people they ran against were Houston Texans, but everyone does that. So it's not particularly surprising. So this offense is in a weird place right now, for sure.
Well, wait, actually, I don't think they did run terribly well against Houston, did they?
They had 172 yards. I mean, that's a lot.
Okay. Well, Chubb himself had a pretty pedestrian game by his standards, so I guess I was more so just looking at that and assuming that his production would signal the rest of production relative. But yeah, I mean, it's still not what it's been for them, and it's funny. I was listening to Locked On Browns podcast to kind of get a gauge of the fan base and looking a little bit about Brown subreddit because we still can't find a Cleveland Browns fan who's willing to even talk to us. But gosh, when you're talking about this offense and the play calling right now from Stefanski, like, it sounds very similar. Browns complaints about Stefanski and the offense sound very similar to Ravens fans about Roman and the Ravens offense. The difference here, of course, is that the Ravens actually have a winning record and the Browns do not. A lot of questionable play calling, a lot of, trying to be too cute. And in particular, there was a play that, if anyone did watch the game, you know what what we're referring to. I didn't, but apparently on the first drive of the game, the Browns on a 4th and 1 I think they were in field goal range.
25-yard line.
Yeah, decided for whatever reason to take Watson out of the game and put Jacoby Brissett in on 4th down, presumably because Jacoby Brissett has like a really high conversion rate on quarterback sneak of 4th and 1, and apparently Watson is incapable of doing that. But I guess that's why you pay him all that guaranteed money. But anyways, so you just bring Brissett in cold off the bench, and instead of doing the sneak, you fake the sneak and you throw a deep ball to Donovan Peoples-Jones, which he overthrows because, coming in cold. So, yeah, gosh, on the podcast, the host of that show went on for about an 8-10 minute tirade on Stefanski's play calling and that play in particular as like Exhibit A for why he should be fired. And I don't think I'm misrepresenting their words terribly much, but yeah, this team, they're 5-7, like we said. But the thing that scares me about this game is I don't think they're mathematically eliminated. Sure, they'll have to run the rest of the game, but this will be Watson's first game in Cleveland. Is the team going to sell out like this is the end of the season for them? And that is one thing to look at. And certainly, while they're beat up, they still do have talented players on that offense that can give the Ravens some fits. And let's be honest, Baltimore, despite the fact that they've won a lot in Cleveland, over the past decade, this has been a tough place for them to play. You look at this game, and as far as games where the Ravens went to Cleveland as of late and had exited with a multi-score lead, you got to go back to 2012, I think, is the last time the Ravens won a game by more than a touchdown in Cleveland.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the scariest thing for me is just the Browns' offense is very similar to our own. And so, every advantage that the Ravens like to talk about with our, how our offense and how ultimately our team is constructed of like own time of possession, run the ball down their throats, hit big plays when you can, rely on defense. Browns, honestly, like from a strategy perspective, they do the same thing. Now that they do it as well, I don't know. I would argue probably the run game's a little bit better. I think Chubb's just a better player. I would maybe argue the Ravens defense is playing at a higher level than the Browns right now, but still, like, they can do a lot of the same things. So, I think that's kind of made these games a little bit close, is that, you don't have a team that can kind of run away with it, but you have teams that can kind of, if the games are close, like, you can keep them close. So, yeah, it's certainly going to be quite a matchup. I think the key for me is going to be really how the Ravens defense plays and pressures Deshaun Watson. I think we've talked about this before. It's one of the reasons we just aren't really, impressed with Watson as a player, is that, frankly, like, has not had good showing at all with any of the matchups that we've played him in. He just really does not look like a good quarterback, at least against some of these Ravens defenses. And I don't think it's hyperbole right now. We're talking about, Ravens defense probably being one of the strongest units that we've seen in a couple of years. So, we'll just have to see. I'm excited for the matchup and Watson versus this defense. I do think that we, edge out in that matchup, but I think what you said, all that is valid, Peter, of just playing into Cleveland. I think historically it's hard to do. I think as a whole, just the matchup, I think it will be difficult. But if it comes down to can Deshaun Watson, step up and make a play on this defense, I got to give that to our defense.
Stat correction before we move on. The Ravens did win by 16 points in 2019 and 17 points in 2017, but the point still stands that there have been a lot of games in recent history where the Ravens have traveled to Cleveland and it's been close and tight, and everything that Chris said is valid as to why that's been.
Yeah, these games have been nausea-inducing, I think. You never sit well with these games, and I do anticipate it being another close one just without the offensive firepower to get it out of arm's reach for a majority of the game. But maybe the defense will be able to get a key turnover that they're able to turn into points. I think that'd be one way this game could get a little out of hand from a Ravens perspective, is one of those kind of key defensive touchdowns. Because, Watson's been good for one interception a game in his return. So I think the guy is still going to be rusty. I think he can be baited. I think our defense is super opportunistic when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I think it's a nice pairing for us to be able to slow him down. And like we've said last week, no one runs against us. And with their offensive line troubles that they're having, I wouldn't be surprised, even though Chubb's an excellent player and I don't want to see him in space, that we're able to wrap him up and keep him well contained. And same thing goes for Hunt.
Yeah, definitely. I think you look at this matchup, and of course there's always the opportunity that we get into this game and everything just kind of clicks for Watson, and he's back to where he was last time he was on the football field. That said, like we're saying, even back in those days, like he would still struggle against elite top-notch defenses, and that's what the Ravens are right now. Like we're saying, they're like you said, it's not just they're difficult to run against. They are giving up passing yards, but they're forcing interceptions. They're doing a lot of pass breakups. It's still difficult to pass on this team when you have all those safeties healthy. And so when you look at this matchup, I agree. It's not homerism to say that side of the ball, there's not going to be much scoring when the Browns are on offense and the Ravens are on defense, in all likelihood. Of course, we could be wrong, but I think that's the likeliest outcome. Whether or not the Ravens win this game is really going to come down to what they can do on offense and how can they take advantage of this Cleveland Browns defense, which is a good unit. They have some monster players out on that side of the football, which of course starts with Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. But this defense certainly has holes as well. There's questionable play calling on that side of the ball as well. And there's definitely some matchups the Ravens can still have, even with their team being beat up, that they can exploit. So really, I'm looking at this game, and I think that what the Ravens need to do is figure out how can we score touchdowns, because, again, with the past 2 weeks, just one offensive touchdown. In the past 4 weeks, we've had 3 games out of 4 where the Ravens have only scored one offensive touchdown, and we don't even know, like we said, if Huntley's going to play. We already know that Lamar is almost likely not. So that's going to be the real challenge for this Ravens team, is figuring out how to score multiple touchdowns to give this defense a little bit more breathing room.
Or they hold the Browns to a field goal and
it doesn't matter.
And that's the strategy. I mean,
sure, yeah. I'm all for that as well, too. But again, like we said, going back to the previous one of them feels a little better and is less stress-inducing to watch.
Absolutely. No, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, yeah, certainly the Ravens of the last couple of weeks, I think, are trying to bring back this throwback defense. I think they're trying to see if the fans remember what it's like to have a defense and not have much of an offense. But yeah, no, it certainly is going to be a challenge. One point I wanted to bring up about Chubb before we kind of go more into the defense is that, even though the Ravens have had a pretty good rushing defense this year, you look at the matchup in October and Chubb was averaging 5.7 yards a carry, which is pretty good. I mean, it's not the best of the season. I think the best came against the Chargers. Looks like he averaged about 8 yards a carry. but it is in the top half of his performances for the season, even against our defense at that point. So, it is easier said than done, I think, to shut a guy down of his caliber. Again, I think especially given our offense and the cute quarterback situation, it's not going to be easy for us to flip the script and say, put up 21 points or something, and then force the Browns to be able to play from behind. I don't think that we're kind of equipped to do that. So I do think it is going to be a challenge for the defense. If this is going to be a close scoring game, they're going to have to be playing lights out for 60 minutes to be able to contain a guy like Chubb, because as we know, all that takes is one play for him to break free, touchdown, and the game's flipped.
One thing I want to point out about the Browns is that in their one touchdown drive against Cincinnati last week, Watson was able to go on a roll. He went 7 for 8. He netted almost all the yards except for 3 of the 81-yard drive, and it was leaning on his 3 main weapons, who I do think in some way, bizarro world, could cause problems for the Ravens, and Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's honestly almost arisen as their number 1 over Amari Cooper, and Njoku. Those 3 guys, I could see them causing a little bit of problems for the Ravens in a bad timeline, so to speak. But I do think we have the talent on defense to keep them all in check and not have too explosive of games.
Yeah, Peoples-Jones has definitely been playing pretty well as of late. I think he crossed over 100 yards, almost tied Jamar Chase in terms of receiving yards last game. He's been a guy I think who's definitely been an X factor for them, who can play really well on the outside, make a few big plays. Marlon definitely needs to have a bounce back game, or Peters, whoever he lines up against. As far as Cooper, it did sound like that he had a hip injury, I believe, that was kind of re-aggravated. So we'll have to check his status. It says he's questionable now. I'd say maybe at this point it's probably likely that he's going to play, but as to how much he can kind of heal up before the matchup, we'll have to see. But it is something to monitor as we move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because on the outside looking in, not as people who watch the Browns with huge amount of regularity, it would seem that Donovan Peoples-Jones has kind of been having a little bit of a breakout year for this team, but the fan base actually isn't super high on him as a deep threat, and it really highlight that as something this offense is really missing, which I found a little interesting when doing my research today, because you look at this guy, he's got 53 catches on the year, 751 yards, averaging 14.2 yards per catch. Now, only 1 touchdown on the year, so some of these yards could be empty calories. But, yeah, he had a bit of a good game against the Ravens earlier this year, caught all of his targets, 6 for 6, 71 yards, and that is something that gave the Ravens secondary a little bit of an issue. Another matchup to look out is the matchup between David Njoku and the Ravens defense. But like I said, I think that's going to be another interesting one to watch. This new and improved linebacker pair of Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen, see how that improved coverage does, because that game was right before two before the Ravens traded for Smith. But yeah, that'll be a difference in this defense going up against the Browns in that matchup that wasn't there last time. Another player who wasn't in the matchup last time, I think, we're talking about what can be different for this offense and help them at least score more points than they have in the past few weeks. Another guy who wasn't in that game, who presumably will be suiting up, is J.K. Dobbins. And where we're talking about struggles of this Cleveland Browns defense, containing the rush has been a bit of an issue for them. Defensively, their interior is still not terribly great. And I think you look at Dobbins, he had a great game against them in 2020, both him and Gus Edwards. I'm looking at that, and I think we can really see yet again the Ravens really be able to ride both those guys regardless of who's back there at quarterback, and that could be huge in this game. I think we could see them have even more yards than we did last week against the Steelers, although that might be asking a lot, because of course the Browns are going to sell out to stop the run because they know that that's going to be what the Ravens are going to want to do. But I wouldn't be shocked if it happens. I think the opportunity is there. It's just going to be how are the Ravens able to scheme it up, and are they going to be able to still run it even when they know that that's what the Ravens want to do?
Yeah, looking at this matchup, I'm not sure if their defense is going to be able to particularly stand up against our offense. Even though it's been really anemic, I'm not saying that I think that this offense is going to be a shootout. I just, even with all the setbacks the Ravens have had on offense, I could see us dominating this defense. And I think one matchup I'm keeping a close eye on is, if we recall, Mark Andrews actually was pretty silenced in the game earlier this year. We were like, wow, he usually owns the Browns. Maybe they figured something out. And honestly, like, he hasn't had that great of a season ever since that game. I'm not saying that he's been found out or something, but I know he's had some miscues with drops and key spots, and his stats could look a little bit better if it wasn't for that. But I'm really curious if he can have a bounce back game, and I think he's a player that the Ravens are going to lean on, particularly in the pass game for this kind of situation, because he's your best pass catcher at this, and like there's nothing that denies it. So if the Ravens could find a way to get him more involved again, that will only benefit the group.
Yeah, definitely. We talked last episode about how Demarcus Robinson has really stepped up as this weapon that we can use in terms of generating first downs and converting. But aside from him, it's basically just been the run game the past couple of weeks, and we need that other element of explosive play from this offense. And yeah, when we're talking about probably Huntley starting, or maybe Brown at this point, could even be Lamar. I mean, who the heck knows? Having a target that we know that we can rely on in Andrews absolutely would be key. One other thing, in terms of like injury report, as something to keep an eye on. One guy who I thought had a pretty good game the last time we played was Owosu Koromoro. Sounds like he had some sort of injury as well in the game against Cincinnati, and so he's again maybe questionable. I think he's supposed to get an MRI today. We're recording Monday. So yeah, I mean, I think his health is going to be pretty critical as well. He was one of those guys we talked about as kind of like a drafted specifically to be able to, be the QB spy on a guy like Lamar Jackson. Extremely fast, pretty good tackler. So yeah, I mean, I think he could also be one of those guys who can sort of take away some stuff in the passing game as well. So, I think it'll be interesting to see, where he kind of ends up.
The one thing I wanted to bring up too about this game and how it's different than the last time we played is, unfortunately, we had Rashad Bateman last time we played them, and obviously Lamar Jackson too. That's a big piece to the puzzle, but we did not have Deshaun Jackson. And while I would rather have Rashad Bateman right now than Deshaun Jackson, the guy has been delivering on a couple plays. We didn't mention it last week, or with the last week's episode about the the Steelers recap. Jeez, I'm like really getting disoriented here. But he had a couple cool catches where he got like 25-yarder, just like staring at the two DBs, being like, "You guys done goofed." And then he also caught the ball off an RPO, which I thought was a really well called play by Giro. And I don't know if the guy has it in him to play more snaps than he's currently playing, but I think he's been pretty darn dynamic for the Ravens in the limited times that he's out there. He gets targeted at a pretty high rate, and like, I'm pleasantly surprised by him, and I think he could be an X factor in this game.
Would love to see it. I said it. I think I said it the first week. Kind of finally saw snaps from him. I was like, he reminds me a little bit of Steve Smith, just in terms of like his stature, kind of how his pads sit. It seems like he had like his big pads or whatever. That play that you're talking about, yeah, in that game against the Steelers, where he's kind of looking at the DBs and chewing at them. I was like, that's Steve Smith. That's right. That's him. That's him right there. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely the question. It's just how many snaps can he play? I'm sure they're probably using him in a little bit just because of his his hammy issue that he had a couple of weeks ago. I probably don't want to re-aggravate that, but 60-yard touchdown to Deshaun to open the game up. I'm down with that.
Bold prediction?
Maybe. Maybe.
Before we continue with the show, we have a special free pick'em pool with DraftKings this week. The winners of the pick'em will win a total of $1,000, with $500 going to the person with the best entry. All you have to do is answer 9 questions about the upcoming Browns versus Ravens game as best as you can. We're talking about who's going to cover the spread, the point total, and how many catches Mark Andrews will have, for example. Please share the link, which will be in the show notes, with friends and family, because it's a free contest. We want as many people to have fun with this as possible, and at least 150 people need to participate for the winners to get their prizes. Like I said, the link is in the show notes and in this chapter marker that you're listening to right now, and we all hope you have fun with this contest and thank DraftKings VIP for partnering with us. Well, I think it's maybe that time of the episode. Let's talk about some bold predictions. I have one. I got one that after that kind of comment, sort of. But it's not about the pass game. I think we keep their rushing attack, the Browns' rushing attack, under 100 yards, which when you consider the fact they have 2 pretty darn good running backs and a running quarterback, I think that might be kind of bold. You know, it might be hard to keep the whole unit, all of them, under 100 yards, particularly in a game where maybe our secondary is making it difficult to pass the ball. And then for score prediction, man, I can't believe they're favored by 3. I'm going to say the Ravens win it by 4 points. I'm going to say they score 20 and the Brownies score 16. That will satisfy the under as well, which is something I literally have bet while we were doing this episode because I feel good about it.
All right. Well, for my bold prediction, I'm going to go also the run game, this time with the Ravens, though. I'm going big. I'm going to say that both J.K. Dobbins and Gus the Bus eclipse the 100-yard mark on the ground. And I am going to say, though, that I still think this is going to be a defensive slog, but the Ravens will prevail 17-13.
Man, I was going to go with Dobbins with 100 yards, Peter, but you just totally upstaged me, so I got to think of another one. That's not bold enough.
Oh, man. That's why you got to jump in first. You got to jump in when you got it.
I know. Well, I mean, we talked about it earlier. I like this one, man. I think I'm going to go a defensive bold prediction here. I'm going to say the Ravens end up with 4 sacks and 2 turnovers off of Watson.
Oh, nice.
I think, we're really gonna double down on this take, man. It's just Deshaun Watson, no good against the Ravens. So yeah, I'm gonna say that. I think the turnover streak is gonna continue, especially with Marcus Williams back. In terms of score predictions, gosh, man, you guys stole my numbers that I wanted here. What the heck? Why don't we
you
go?
Can bet it. It's fine.
No, it's okay. That's okay. Why don't we go? I'm gonna say the Ravens can score 18 points. What do we leave the Browns with? 18-7. Say they can get a touchdown.
You know, the thing I meant to bring up during the episode that I forgot, but I'll kind of leave our listeners with this, is that when Brissett was playing, in 9 of the 11 starts, he had an expected points value on offense that was positive. And the 2 starts for Watson, they've been bad. They've been very negative. And I heard rumbling that maybe if it wasn't for the fact they paid Watson all this money and all this crap, based on the way he's played, you might, any other team, if you had no idea who these guys were, you might actually be switching to Brissett. So something to keep an eye on. We all think, I think, that Watson, despite the fact we don't think he's that good, has a higher ceiling than Brissett, but he hasn't seen it just quite yet. And I hope it takes at least another week for him to figure that all out.
Oh, I mean, I think that, let's say the Browns, instead of them being 5-8, were flopped. You know, they're 8-5. They're firmly in the wild card race. If Watson has another performance like that in this game, I think you would have to switch back to Brissett. But with their playoff hopes being as slim as they are right now, if I were the Browns, I think you already dug this grave. You just got to play him out and have him shake off all that rust. Because, I mean, let's also be honest. With him being out of the game for that long and playing with a new team, it's kind of not terribly hard to expect that that would be the case in those first 2 games. But, at some point he is going to play better. Just hopefully it is not till next year, because the Ravens, or at least, if he wants to play better, after this game.
Certainly. Well, let us know what you think. If you want to tweet at us or leave a comment on this YouTube video, let us know your score predictions and then bold prediction. And you can follow us on Twitter at OneWinningPod. You can email us onewinningpod@gmail.com. And of course, like I said, you can follow the YouTube channel where we're getting more and more views. So we appreciate you guys checking it out. And we'll see you next week, hopefully with another Ravens victory. Remember, the game is on Saturday at 4:30, not Sunday anymore. So adjust your calendars, adjust your plans. Make sure you can root on the Ravens. They'll need all the help they can get, particularly with this quarterback situation. And we hope for another victory that will propel us, I think, into the playoffs.